A vermouth rosso is like the skeleton in a human body. It keeps the Boulevardier, Manhattan, the Negroni cocktail standing. Our goal was producing Vermouth di Torino, which is the peak of the pyramid of vermouths.
Hey, this is Harman Skurnik, and welcome to another episode of Skurnik Unfiltered with Jared Maguire, who is portfolio manager here at Skurnik for all things spirits. You recently sat down with Vito Zoppi.
Vittorio
Zoppi. He is the proprietor of Antica Torino.
That's right. If you've spent 10 minutes with him, he's Uncle Vito. He's slapping you on the back, exchanging jokes, exchanging phone numbers. I think the key with Vito for his whole life has always been his inimitable charisma and his energy and his industry, and it's really served him well.
Yeah, he is lovable around here. I think part of the Skurnik family. And what keeps him here and what keeps us loving him, in addition to his wonderful charisma and personality, is the wonderful products that he represents. And these are authentic Amari, bitters, genepi, cognatos that are ancient recipes, mostly from Piedmont, and thus the name Torino, right?
That's right. Yep. Most famously, Vermouth di Torino, which we nerd out a lot here. We have representations of a number of different vermouth styles, and he represents and his brand embodies the classic Vermouth di Torino, which is characterized very, very specifically, and there's a real expectation that you're going to hear about as it relates to other vermouths. Totally different from a Marseille style, totally different from Chambéry, and of course we have those representations as well as domestic vermouth, but he really defines the style and brings out the best of the category.
I would also say the recipes that they use are, if nothing, authentic.
Absolutely authentic, a handful of which actually discovered from old pieces of paper in a very romantic and purely Italian style.
And he has quite a following.
Yeah, that is thanks to the steadiness and the quality of the product that he's represented for as long as he has. It's also, again, thanks to that attention that he brings visiting the market. And this is a brand that is growing so fast, it's really difficult to keep enough in stock. So we're constantly growing, and it's one of our fastest growing brands as well.
No wonder he loves us.
That's right.
Well, let's experience some of that charisma and listen to your conversation with Uncle Vito Zoppi.
I'm very excited. Vito, welcome.
Hi.
Tell us where it all started. Where were you born?
I was born in Genoa in a family with brothers, in a humble, very humble family. Food was everything we could enjoy and be happy with. So lunch and dinner was always a big deal. And I remember mom, cooking 2 separate bowls of pasta, one for her and my father, a smaller pot, and another one bigger for me and the siblings. So food and wine has always been there in my heart. Around 5 p.m., we were used to serve some China martini, and I was taking back and forth from the kitchen, the empty glasses, and I was digging with my finger into the glass and tasting aromatized wine of any kind, nothing fancy, but, talking about the 60s, the late of the 60s. So this was the first memory I have of vermouths, Chinas, and these kind of things.
Flash forward to the mid-1980s. You're living in Milan.
Yeah.
You're a young man. You're selling computers. You're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
You said you're making some pretty good money, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Officially in 1984, I joined the company in the computing business, and I started to sell IBM system and all the softwares which were popping up in the 80s. And that was the real beginning of the sales career.
So you have this career, and then you suffer a personal tragedy.
July 1995, my younger brother, he passed away, and I was devastated. And a few days later, one of my customers, whom I didn't know, owned an import company based in Brookline, Massachusetts. He was importing in the US Italian wines. I didn't even know that. He phoned me. He says, "Hey, Vito, would you be willing to consider a job on the West Coast as West Coast manager?" I think I paused for 2-3 seconds. I said, "Oh, yes. Okay, when am I going to leave?" And I left a few months later. I didn't even discuss the pay. I just said yes because that was the hook I needed to put head above water. And this is how I ended up in the wine business in San Francisco, where I lived several years.
Before California, you did like a week in Chicago, right?
I did a few weeks of training on the road. So I ended up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with a gentleman who used to import Italian wines. He taught me what he knew in a few days, and he told me one thing. He said, Vito, you're going to find a lot of nice people in the United States of America. And this is what happened then. Went to Chicago. I remember the gentleman's name, Jim Mello. He was a Vietnam veteran, and I spent a week with him, with his executive management and with some of his salespeople, who was made of Vietnam veterans, like being in a jungle, with a machete in your hand, learning as fast as I could. And after 2 weeks, I ended up San Francisco with 2 luggages, and I started my career in the wine business. America means a lot to me. I know that these days, not what the rest of the world is thinking, but this is what I think, because I met so many people, good people in America, that I owe to this country. And I am who I am because of the time spent in the United States.
So you spend a week in this literal boot camp.
Yeah, kind of
with
like
an ex-Vietnam vet as a general manager and a bunch of sales reps who are Vietnam vets. And here you are, fresh from Milan, and you said you didn't speak enough English to ask for a shoe shine.
Exactly right,
But it's a testament, I think, to you as a human being and your charms that you still were able to go to California and develop the entire
the West Coast
western part of the
network
country, right?
for this importer of Italian wine. The name of the importer was Dufour and Company. And the gentleman who hired me, his name is still alive, he lives in Switzerland, is Francois Dufour, whom, again, I owe my entrance in the wine business.
So after Dufour, 7 years or so in California, a really big career opportunity comes your way, right? And you move to the New York metropolitan area.
Yes. I worked for Vias. In those years, Vias was one of the main players of the Italian wine import business. There was Winebo, and there were a bunch of other companies which were growing fast, very fast, like Skurnik or Polaner and others.
And Vias at the time, we're talking brands like Planeta and Gravner, Aldo
Conterno and others. And this is when I developed even more passion for wine. But let me say something that I want to point out. The 7 years I spent on the West Coast really helped me to understand what the business of importing Italian wine and wine in general is. What I understood the most was the needs of the distributors. So when I talk about business with you guys and others, I know exactly where you come from, because 7 years with a wine bag on the shoulder going out with wine wrap or without, you learn what they want and what they need. So when you incorporate your own gig, as I did in 2015, I knew exactly which door I was going to knock and how strong to knock to have the door open.
2005, you've been in the United States for 10 years. And you need another change. It's time for another change.
Yeah, it was time of another change. But again, it was not a choice of business. It was a choice of life. I ended up to go back to Italy, hoping to keep the marriage together. Instead, the marriage fell apart as soon as I landed back in Italy. But that's life. So I started from scratch, and I started to broker Italian wineries into United States. It was not easy, but it was not difficult because I knew the players and I knew their needs.
So you start over by leveraging your industry connections to broker estate wineries. And your work in this capacity leads you to Skurnik.
It led into Skurnik. It was 2014. I was repping a winery from Apulia, which is in the Skurnik portfolio. It's called Taurino. Is one of the producers. Actually, I think it is the producer which paved the road for Apulian wines in the United States of America. And I ended up to talk to your Italian sales director, Mark Fornatale, and this is how it started. Then He introduced me to your spirits manager, Adam Schumann, and at that time I was putting together my own gig of Vermouth di Torino called Antica Torino, and this is how the story with Skurnik started.
So let's talk about the origins of Antica Torino. At some point, I think you said one of your U.S. distributor contacts recommends that you broker an Italian vermouth.
Exactly right. And so I said, oh, yeah, easy. Honestly, I didn't have a clue. I had the memories of my grandma and father, sipping on that, but nothing close to reality. So I got back to Italy and I went on a 6-month hunt to grab a vermouth producer, but either I didn't like the juice or the juice was already taken by other importers. So Paula, who shares her life with me, suggested me to be bold and start my own gig. And 1 year later, I ended up to incorporate the company, making the first batch. It was December 2016, was the red vermouth, a very long journey to come up with the recipe because I didn't know how to make recipes for aromatized wine. And we bottled the first 3,000 bottles in Torino, and the first shipment was to Skurnik.
Okay, so Paola gives you the inspiration or says you should try making this yourself. And then you partner with another well-known figure in the wine industry, Filippo Antonelli.
Filippo Antonelli, exactly. He's a Sagrantino DOCG producer in Umbria. He's a friend of mine, and he's originally on his mother's side from Piedmont, and he had similar memories, and so we decided to put together the gig together. But there was a perfect timing because on one hand, in the United States of America, there was going on a renaissance for artisanal spirits, vermouths, aromatized wine, bitters, and so forth. And at the same time, in Piedmont, there was a renaissance similar to the one in the United States, but was focusing very much on the Vermouth di Torino. In fact, in 2017, Vermouth di Torino became an EU appellation called Vermouth di Torino IG, Indicazione Geografica, and that is the only EU wine appellation which refers to a city of almost 1 million people, a typically small little town which are like jewels. Torino is the jewel of vermouth, also chocolate. We make fantastic dark chocolate. It's humble than other cities, not flashy as Rome, Venice, and Florence. It's not the first stop. Torino was also a city which in the 70s and in the 80s was the heart of political activism because in Torino was based the bigger car factory, Fiat, fix it again, Tony, as American used to say. So I was part of that protest, and often we went to Torino to protest against this and that. Also is the capital of the region of Piedmont, where the most important wines of Italy come from. Tuscans, excuse me, but the beauty of Nebbiolo is renowned all over the world. So definitely is a food and wine destination.
They won't excuse you, but...
And I know they won't, but...
You set out to make vermouth, Vermouth di Torino, which is a very specific style, quite apart from the bright herbal Chambéry style, like Vermouth Rutan or Dolin, or the more maybe oxidative Marseille style like a Noilly Prat. So what, in your view, defines the Torino tradition and what sets your brand apart?
A vermouth rosso, they call it sweet and red vermouth. It's like the skeleton in a human body. It keeps the Boulevardier, Vert Manhattan, the Negroni cocktail standing. The appellation says why the Vermouth di Torino is apart from the rest of the vermouth. You must use wine from Italy. It could be white, it could be red. We typically in Italy use fresh wine. In Spain or in Marseille, as you mentioned, they use oxidized wine. It's different, you make different cocktails. And many producers, including ourselves, go beyond that rule and make the belt one extra hole using wine from a specific region, which are even more meaningful. For instance, we try to use as much as we can Cortese grape and Chardonnay grapes from Piedmont.
And how did you settle on this particular blend? I know it varies a little bit, but Chardonnay, Cortese.
Well, the idea was using as much as possible wines from Piedmont. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's less easier, depending on the quality of the vintage, depending on the availability of wine. In our case, our vermouth, I think, are driven primarily by the botanicals, which was our idea, and the appellation. Wormwood must be the predominant botanical, and wormwood must be grown in Piedmont. So you cannot make a Vermouth di Torino using wine from Australia or wormwood from the Czech Republic, or making a Vermouth di Torino 100% oregano or rosemary in terms of botanicals. You have to respect the rules of the appellation. My excels for a strong component of aromatic herbs. I use oregano, rosemary, red thyme, and laurel leaf. A significant amount of bitter botanicals, which give structure to the product. We use aloe, gentian rhubarb, and a hint of genepi. And then every producer has his ribbon on the gift box. I put cumin, ginger, grapefruit, and vanilla. The actors on the stage are the botanicals, not the wine. We make some other products like vino chinato rosso and vino chinato bianco, where wine and botanicals are equally important. The vino chinato bianco is made with Moscato, the vino chinato rosso is made with Nebbiolo from Barbaresco. But the vermouth, we want to make a statement in terms of the recipe. It takes forever to come up with a recipe, especially when you are new in the industry. And also, it pleases me the most when I'm in front of sommelier or bartenders and buyer in general, is when they say, wow, it's very drinkable, has a lot of equilibrium, because drinkability and equilibrium, the way it smells, the mid-palate and the finish is what we really want to achieve in our Vermouth di Torino. So it's to be something that you can judge it, not depending on which cocktail you're going to make with it, because making cocktail, you can be a magician and make also a good cocktail with a lousy vermouth, but if you taste by itself, it got to be good on its own. So this is what we care the most.
The requirements, as you've mentioned, for Vermouth di Torino are fairly loose. Piedmontese wormwood, the primary botanical, the ABV has to fall within a particular prescribed range. But other than that, you have quite a lot of creative license to play with the wine base, with the sweetening agent, and of course, the botanical makeup. So tell us, did this freedom in form unleash your creativity, or did it give you anxiety because there were so many different directions?
No, actually, starting from scratch, having rules and a guideline helps. The rules of the appellation are important for producing accordingly to quality, and at the same time, they help you to achieve your goal. And our goal was producing Vermouth di Torino, which is the peak of the pyramid of vermouth.
Every detail of these beautiful bottles celebrates Torino. Could you tell us about the art on these labels and the inspiration behind them?
Of course. The label of Antica Torino is not a label I own. It was the cover of the catalog of the international exhibit which took place in Torino in 1911.
The World's Fair.
World's Fair, exactly right. So I was looking for something which could deliver a classic image and an historical image of the appellation and of the city. That image belongs to the city of Turin, so I signed the lease with them. They authorized us to use it. Actually, we are very happy that we are bringing in North America, in particular, that image of Torino. Is a fountain which was called Fontana Monumentale, monumental fountain, which was built the year before the World Fair.
And the World Fair, I think, was for the 50th anniversary of the Italian unification.
Absolutely, yes. 1861, 1911 makes 50. Yes.
So a real time to celebrate.
It was a very important World's Fair, a very important moment for the city of Torino, which now is flourishing again, is a tourist destination. There is also very strong university. It's a beautiful city, but it's a city that from an architectural and cultural point of view, everybody should see at some point.
So outside of vermouth, you've built a pantheon of Northern Italian classics, including your Stellari wine-based aperitivi line, also Amaro, Bitter Bianco, you have a Genepi, a Gensiana, and a Vino Chinato. While we don't have time to explore the entire range in detail, give us the general overview of the full range and what each expression represents with regard to your brand and the cocktailing world at large.
Well, the A, B, and C are the three vermouths di Torino, rosso, bianco, and dry. All of them have been somehow inspired also by Skurnik wines at different moments of their development. Certainly, Skurnik has checked all the prototypes before we arrived at the last recipe, so your help was very important. Then we added the Chinatos, which are made with particular wine. So we have Nebbiolo from Barbaresco, and we have Vino alla China Bianco, which is one of the ingredients for the Vesper cocktail, which is made with Moscato Secco from a winery, Vittorio and Marco Adriano in Le Langhe. So we have 3 vermouth, 2 Chinatos. There are 2 kind of like a sub-brand called Stellare, are aperitifs. One is red and one is white. They are meant for long drinks, a spritz style of product. They are also slightly lower price. And then there is Amaro, Genepi, and Gentian, because they are part of the history of Piedmont. You know, every region, every province of Italy, and I could go even deeper and go into villages. There is a history of homemaking Amaros. Everybody makes his own thing, something like putting a tea sack into a cup of hot water. It doesn't take much. Of course, when you want to make a product to introduce in the industry, you have to respect some rules. But Amaro is made everywhere in Italy and definitely in Piedmont. Gentian and Genepi are 2 different concepts, more specific to the region, because Genepi is a plant which grows above 1,500 meters, both in the region of Piedmont and Val d'Aosta, so it's very meaningful to the region. And Gentian, I was very intrigued by making a Gentian liqueur, because Gentian, which is a plant, but you use the root of the plant, is like parsley and garlic in the kitchen. In every recipe, every producer, every product, there is Gentian, but rarely you find a 100% Gentian. So mine is 100% Gentian. Beyond that, we also added some wine in it, so makes it a very interesting product.
I know it's a big range, but what are you drinking these days from your own set here?
What I drink these days is Negroni Bianco, which is a combination of classic because of Negroni and new because the Negroni Bianco, it could be a little lower in alcohol, so drinking, smarter. So Negroni Bianco, I can either make it with my dry vermouth or the Bianco vermouth, my bitter Bianco, and then the fantastic gin. I mean, you guys have many of them, but I had it last week with Green Hook, which I think is one of your gin.
One of our classics.
Yeah. All my vermouth have a significant personality, I think, due to the quality of the wine, but due to the presence of the aromatic herbs. In the Bianco, we have a little bit of basil, sage, marjoram. So it goes well with a juniper-driven London-style gin.
We will go to the bar and go play around.
Oh,
and we'll get you
it's
a
time,
great
baby.
shake.
It's time we go.
One more thing, Vito, your birthday is coming up. Yeah?
August 7th.
I want to give you a shout out to that, but I also want to offer my hearty congratulations to an incredible achievement that you received just the other day. Do you want to tell our listeners?
Well, something that I'm very proud of and is the green card.
Green card.
Thanks to my son, who is a U.S. citizen because he was born in San Francisco, so he was the sponsor. With everything has been happening in the United States, there are people leaving and people coming, something like on the red carpet. But I'm very proud of that because, as I said, I am who I am. I could not be who I am without the ordinary Americans and the United States of America.
Well, we're thrilled for you and thrilled to have you here as often as we can get you, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Grazie.
Grazie a te, grazie mille, grazie a tutti. Forza Juve. I love you.
Skurnik Unfiltered is recorded at Skurnik Wines and Spirits headquarters in the Flatiron District of New York City. If you found the conversation interesting, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. You can stay up to date on our show and upcoming events by following Skurnik Wines on Instagram and visiting our website at skurnik.com.